Hello there, folks, and back again for another video. In this one, going to be talking a little bit more about the rules of Warhammer Age of Sigmar and why I enjoy them so much. This kind of may be a little bit more of a shorter video. It's kind of just my thoughts and impressions as we've sort of played out the first couple of games of the new edition of the rules for the game. But as someone who played the first edition and kind of didn't really get it because I felt like it was too nebulous and weird, and I don't think even Games Workshop had necessarily thought about how they were going to approach bringing the rules together. Coming back to the game in third edition, the end of third edition and the beginning of fourth edition has been really fascinating. I've been watching a lot of videos from the likes of The Honest Wargamer and Tabletop Tactics, and also Liam Dempsey, and it's been really interesting seeing how they've approached the new edition of the game and how they've felt about the rules, and how some of them have come to it completely fresh and found themselves really engaging with it, whilst others have been playing with the rules for a really long time. And it's been really interesting to see how they've seen the development into the new edition of the rules and how and what's been tweaked. Now, a lot of the fourth edition rules are very similar to third edition and the way that it plays. But I think one of the things that really makes Warhammer Age of Sigmar and the new edition so interesting to me as a game is the fact that they've made it a lot more interactive as an experience at the tabletop. Warhammer 40,000, while it's great and it's been really interesting to play that over the last the last year or so, and really get our heads around it and start to actually understand the rules in a lot more detail, so we can kind of play games without having to look up stuff in books and all that kind of stuff. It still feels like the game that it always has been, and Warhammer 40,000 still feels like it's stuck in the past, as it were. And so what's been really interesting with Age of Sigmar is it definitely feels like they've taken the ball that they developed during like the halfway through the first edition into second, third, and fourth and run with it, and made the game feel more interactive, more exciting, more tactical than your classic games of Warhammer 40,000. Now, I think a large part of that comes from the fact that in Warhammer 40,000, you are dealing with a game which is primarily all about shooting stuff. Even if you're going to be playing a melee army like Tyranids or whatever, it's still a game about shooting things. And so when you're aiming to sort of like take down your foes, you're having to worry about cover and all this kind of thing. I think with Warhammer Age of Sigmar, you've got this really interesting nuance between the way that you move tactically to get into combat, control objectives, shoot your enemies, all mixed together in one. And I think it's an interesting thing to try and describe, because I don't think I could put my finger on any particular point. But I think one of the nice things about it is that you look at stuff like, where's the page with all the abilities and things on it? You look at this and it seems like it's just complicated, weird stuff, but in actual fact, it all kind of flows and works really nicely together. And I like that both you and your opponent feel like you have something to do in each phase of the game. So even though effectively Age of Sigmar is still I go, you go, where one player has a turn and the other player has a turn, even though you have these abilities that can be done, here you'll have something that your opponent can do in response to it. So you'll have ways that you can charge back at your opponent, or shoot as they're running into combat, or move away from an enemy as they start to get close to you. So even though it's your opponent's movement phase, you can spend effectively resources in order to try and do something to get out of a situation, which means that it's just intensely more reactive as a game experience than Warhammer Age of Sigmar ever was. And it kind of makes me think that while I don't want there to be two identical rule sets that deal with sci-fi and fantasy, maybe Warhammer 40,000 will start to go down the route of having alternative activation or alternating activation at the core of its being, to make it feel more reactive, a little bit like Warhammer Age of Sigmar does. I think one of the other things that's really interesting about Warhammer Age of Sigmar is that I don't feel like the design studio, both from a miniature and hobby point of view, but also from a from a rules point of view, mechanics point of view, feel as tied in to the lore and how things should work. I say in inverted commas, as they do in Warhammer 40,000. In 40k, it's been around for a really long time. People expect Space Marines to fight like Space Marines, whereas in Age of Sigmar, because the world allows them a lot more freedom in the way that their armies work, you then get to play around with lots of interesting ways that your faction works rules-wise on the tabletop. So, if you suddenly have an army of eel-riding elves with no eyes, they have a lot more. You can have a lot more fun in that kind of developmental play space than I think you would normally have in Warhammer 40,000. But again, I think a lot of it comes down to the interactivity of Warhammer Age of Sigmar and the rules as a whole. I think it also really helps that the rules are very easy to pick up. They've still maintained this idea that you don't have a lot of interactiveness between the war scroll that your characters have and the one that your opponent has. Obviously, the rend comes into it towards the end of that sequence where you lower your opponent's armor saves, etc. But I think there's a really nice fluidity to, I just need to look at this thing, I need 3s, 4s, and then it's -1 to whatever you do. I think it's a really quick and easy way to start playing games at a little bit more pace, and it means that you can dive in and play a game of Warhammer Age of Sigmar in half the time of a game of Warhammer 40,000 at exactly the same point cost because of the fluidity of how it all works mechanically. I also think one of the really nice things about the game is army composition and the way that they develop that. So now you have this idea of regiments that you build. So with a character can then choose units that go into their regiment, and then these regiments kind of will all sort of work together as part of a larger army. You can obviously deploy in different ways if you like. But I think the regiment system has been really interesting for army building and making people make certain decisions. I do think that it needs to be a little bit more developed and fleshed out as it goes along. I'd like there to be more restrictions on regiments for particular armies. So, like, if you do take a shaman, for example, in your army, they have access to only a limited pool of miniatures, but also maybe a few of the key things that you'd think that you'd want for a larger army. So it allows you to think about a more diverse force rather than just picking whatever the meta would be for a particular army on the tabletop. Obviously, you can take that in different ways and interpret it in different ways, of course, but it's just something that I think I'd be nice to see. I also really like that the armies that you build for Warhammer Age of Sigmar, mainly due to the points, I suppose, feel like manageable armies to play on the tabletop. I think they've done a really nice job of making it so that you can build an army that feels interesting and diverse, but not unwieldy. Like, I've played 1,000 point games over the last little while, and it's been fun with like a handful of units, whereas you look at the equivalent kind of army in Warhammer 40,000 and you're almost finding yourself playing with double the amount of units, with more models within each of those units as well, and it all starts to get a little bit unwieldy and doesn't feel like it plays as smoothly as Age of Sigmar. Now, obviously, there's the development of this game over the last couple of years compared to 40k, which obviously came out before this, but I genuinely think that they've done a really good job of putting together a fascinating rule set that will be fun for people to dive into. All of the cool rules are available online for free, so you can go and check them out and play some games, get started with it. Alongside, obviously, all the war scrolls, bar the Skaven war scrolls are available. You can get those through the app or whatever. Although, if you go and download PDFs from online, you'll probably be able to find the old war scrolls that they put up before they released the Skaven Battle Tome. Just use those if you've got some miniatures lying around and have some fun that way, I suppose. Another thing that I really like, and it's something that I want to dive into more, is Path to Glory, which is what you can see shown off here. This starts you off with smaller armies using non-named heroes, and you develop and tell stories as you go through, completing quests and exploring the mortal realms in more detail with naming your characters and building up lore and all that kind of good stuff. And what I like about this as well is that it just feels not basic, but slimmed down enough that it's just quick and easy to dive into. There's none of the baggage that comes with the way that Crusade works in Warhammer 40,000, which always feels like it's a little bit more of an admin chore, whereas I think they've taken a lot of the admin out of Path to Glory in Age of Sigmar and made it a lot more of an interesting game for you to play. It also comes with these really fun and interesting battle plans that are, again, slightly more narratively focused, and I think that's a really fascinating approach as well. I think 40k feels a lot more kind of meta chasery, hard and fast rules, etc., whereas Warhammer Age of Sigmar feels like it's kind of enjoying all the different elements of it from a hobby point of view, from a rules point of view, from a narrative, from a meta point of view, and it's really developed in an interesting way, I think, for tabletop gamers. So, obviously, if you were not a fan of the rules for Warhammer Age of Sigmar back when they came out originally, maybe you're not going to enjoy the game as it stands now, but I would really recommend that you go and maybe give the game a try as part of a demo somewhere. If you've got someone who has some armies or a store nearby, go and just give it a shot. I think you'd be pleasantly surprised by the rules that Games Workshop put together for Warhammer Age of Sigmar and the way that it plays. And it genuinely feels like everything has a place in the game and acts like it should. Troops feel like troops, monsters feel like monsters, characters feel like epic characters, but only if you use them as part of an interesting tactical makeup in your games on the tabletop. But yeah, less said about endless spells and weird faction terrain. Christ, I'm not a fan of that, but there we go. If you're interested in talking about the rules, down in the comments below, please dive in and share your thoughts. Let me know what you think of 4th edition and the rules as they stand. How have you been playing a lot of games? Do you enjoy the way that it's sort of panning out for you? Did you get turned off by it? Are you someone who played the 1st or 2nd edition and have come back for 4th and been really surprised by how it's developed? Let me know, and we'll have a little bit of a chat. As I say, it'd be really cool to hear what you have to say in the comments down below. Like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and we'll be back with another video very, very soon. Bye for now.